everyone. It's such a great pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me. And right now, I have to admit, I'm feeling a little bit naked. I know I'm not naked, otherwise we have a much bigger problem on our hands, but I'm feeling exposed right now. And the reason why I'm feeling exposed is because as a market researcher, what I'm used to are PowerPoint slides full of charts and tables and numbers. But today, look, no clicker, no PowerPoint slides. And it's just as well, because I am not here today to talk about the latest data set that I've been working on or the consumer trends that I've been seeing. And I know that some of you who've seen my work for the National Coffee Association and the Coffee Association of Canada kind of expect that from me. But today, I'm here to show you what happens to a market researcher when you strip away her numbers and PowerPoint slides and you look beyond the data. Now, don't get me wrong, data's pretty awesome. I know I'm biased saying that, but I just think of all of the questions that I've been able to answer over the years for my clients, and also random people like yourselves that I meet at conferences. I get questions like, Cheryl, who's our cold brew customer? Who drinks our product? I get questions like, are people getting into coffee younger and younger? What's the growth on single cup during COVID? And I'll provide my answers to my clients, and off they go running to create their PowerPoint slides, probably to inform on their business strategy. And then people like yourselves, they become my new friends. Data has a way of doing that. So without giving away confidential information on what my clients are working on, what I can tell you is that over the past year, just over the past year, I've been able to participate in projects that inform my clients how to position specialty coffee, especially for their business, and how to market it to their consumers. Data has also informed my clients on what the most the next incremental flavor to offer in their portfolio of brands. Data has also informed us on how to grow cold coffee in a cold country like Canada, where I'm from. And data has also informed a mainstream brand on how to get into the premium space. And hold on, what does that even mean anyway to a consumer, premium and mainstream? The list of interesting projects, it goes on, but the point is that data helps empower us to make business decisions. And it's my job as the data researcher to make that come alive for my clients. And in order to make that come alive, what I see is just beyond numbers, okay? I still see numbers, but I see much more than that. And I'm thinking back on more than 20 years ago when I did my English Lit degree, and you might ask me, I get this question all the time, what's an English major doing in market research? And the simple answer is, I tell stories. I tell stories not using words, eventually they will come, but I tell stories using data, okay? And data has a way of kind of reflecting on the broader perspective of what's going on in our world beyond just the coffee industry. So now what I want you to do is close your eyes. Go ahead, close your eyes. And I want you to think about the images that you saw during that first year of the pandemic in 2020. You might be picturing perhaps that ballet dancer who was using the gas mask, dancing, posing in the middle of an empty Times Square. Or do you remember images of a doctor crouching over in defeat and exhaustion? Or maybe you remember the images of people outside their homes or on their balconies, banging on their pots and pans in gratitude or in protest, depending on where you are. So for those images, It was the photographer's job. It was their job to make that image come alive for us, to tell the story behind that image. That's essentially what my job is, to tell the story, to make it come alive for everyone, but using numbers and not an image. So what did I see when I looked at the coffee consumer data tracking back in 2020? Yes, of course, I did see a lot of that out-of-home volume shift towards in-home because of the public health restrictions. And yes, during that time, it was very, very uncertain for everyone, okay? But most, of course, talking to you folks out here, it was very uncertain for the cafe and coffee shop owners, for small business owners, period. And in the face of uncertainty, I say, use data to chart a path to certainty. Fast forward to about a year and a half into the pandemic, and I noticed that there were suddenly more men drinking coffee than women. And I thought, oh, that's funny. That's really strange because gender usually does not have any bearing on coffee consumption. But here I am noticing that there's a slight uptick amongst men, more so amongst the older men drinking coffee. So I dug deeper. And I noticed that there were more unemployed women in our data set than usual. And it wasn't that women weren't drinking coffee, it was simply that more men were drinking coffee, okay? And what it said to me was that when I dug deeper, the data set was reflecting that COVID had impacted women negatively in terms of gender equality and in terms of women's roles in society. And I called it out during one of my webinars. It was only a few data points within our coffee work, but look at what had happened. It had a way of reflecting the broader perspective and reflecting what was going on in our social dynamics. It was a story about women's priorities, if she had quit her job in frustration, or it was a story of priorities on someone else's priorities, if she had no chance or no choice in the matter. And all we needed to do was pay attention to the data. So for data, for me, it's more than just the numbers on the page. And there are many, many more stories that I could tell. I can tell stories of hope, I can tell stories of resilience, but for me, the most important part about data and storytelling is what it says about us as consumers, as human beings, just kind of operating and going about in our daily lives. And more than ever, I implore you, each and every one of you, to consider how to use data in order to inform your business. Yes, data is accessible to everyone. It is not just for the big corporations who can afford it. There are many other tools out there that make data much more accessible. That is a completely different talk on its own, and I'm happy to kind of take it offline and talk about it more. But really, what data does is it brings us together and it tells a very compelling story about us. It's kind of like coffee. When we think about coffee, it has its functional use, right? It gets me up and going, in the morning, allows me to get to work as a functioning adult. But if I were simply to think about coffee for its functional use case, I lose out on the emotional impact that coffee can bring us together, the social implications of coffee bringing us together. That is what data does for me. It has this functional use to inform businesses, but it also has a way of kind of reflecting what's going on out there in our world and what it means for us as human beings. For that women in priority story, I know it made me pause. As a female leader at work, what does that mean? How do I lead? How do I treat my colleagues, particularly those who are parents? And that's the beauty of data, is that, yes, it informs what we can do, but hopefully, it empowers us to make impactful change with our newfound knowledge. But a story, a good story at that, it has a way to hook you. It has a way to keep you coming back for more. So today, I talked about uncertainty, I talked about priorities, but I didn't talk about hope like my session title said I would. So that's my hook for you. I will see you tomorrow for more data storytelling. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Cheryl. I feel like, again, I have so many questions. As somebody who is constantly working in the data space, are you ever surprised by anything, or you sort of see it and it's, anyway, I just want to know if you're ever surprised.
I'm always surprised. That's what keeps me around, right? Spoiler alert, the last story, no one likes a cliffhanger, by the way, so please don't throw your water bottles at me. The spoiler alert is that the last story that I get to tell tomorrow about hope was one of the bigger surprises that I saw coming from the coffee work that I did. And you know, without giving away too much, you go into a study, a market research study, assuming one thing. You always have a hypothesis. It's very much like, you know, a science project where you have your hypotheses and you conduct your experiment and your research in hopes that it will prove or disprove of it. And it's very similar to market research. So when you go in and you start digging into the data and you start kind of weaving your narrative, then that's how I basically tell my story, and I'm always surprised at what comes out. And hopefully, you know, that's what kind of gives, you know, our clients and basically you know, coming back for more.
When I look at a big sort of data set, like I said, I'm often really overwhelmed by numbers. They're not my thing. I am way more about words. But you seem to find a way to be able to sort of dig into those stories. So what helps you to see those things?
Yeah, data doesn't happen in a vacuum, right? Like it's one data set, it's one market research study, but you have to, in order to be consultative, you know, you have to kind of consider all of the dynamics that happen on the outskirts. It's like we as human beings do not just operate in our own little bubble. Like there's all these other dimensions and other factors that influence what we do and how we think. So it's, you look at the data and you have to answer your client's questions and the objectives of the study and whatnot, but there's also a whole other there's whole other considerations that you want to take, you know, into account when you're weaving that narrative together.
And where do I go to find this context? Because it sounds like that's what you're really leaning into here, is the greater context. Is there a place we should be looking at, or?
Well, it's not just one website, it's just everywhere, right? Like data is all around us. So it's basically just keeping your eyes and ears to the ground. It's knowing, you know, obviously you guys know, you know, your industry, you know, your clients, and it's just really thinking about what the data is saying about, you know, your client's business or, you know, the questions that you're trying to answer. But what does it mean from a human perspective? What does it mean for your end consumers?
How do you know what it means? So I'm just curious because you said it could go either way, right? You notice this small change in the number and it could be one of many stories. How do you ultimately identify which one it might be?
There's not, that's the beauty of it, is that there may or may not be one right answer, right? It's the interpretation of it. And you know, as a data researcher, you know, it's my job to be as objective as possible and tell it like it is. But I guess we would never really know. It's just one story.
Yeah. I see we have a question here from the audience. And if you have questions, please do submit them. How do smaller companies access good data without blowing through their marketing budget?
Yeah, fantastic question. So the tech space, what my industry, the consumer insights and the research industry, have now kind of coined is the res tech, the research technology, and there are so many other tools that allow you to run your own market research studies, very, very small, and just connect to your consumers in a very cost-efficient, time-efficient way. If you've been in the industry for a long time, you know that market research can cost thousands and thousands of dollars and take weeks and weeks to execute. It's not the case anymore. It's terrifying for someone like me that the industry is moving at a faster pace, but it's fantastic for everyone that data is now a bit more democratized and that it's accessible for a lot of people and smaller companies.
Can you tell me, and it's okay if you can't because I know we have to be very careful about some of the confidential information, but I'm thinking about the work you've done on the National Coffee Data Trends Study. What are some of the things that you've seen there over the longer time horizons that maybe have been a little bit unexpected, if anything? Yeah,
it's just the NCDT, right? It's certainly evolved with the times, and it should evolve with the times. People are changing, the world is changing, consumers are changing. My colleagues, Bill, just from the previous discussions, are basically saying, it's a different consumer with each generation, and I think that what I've seen from the NCDT is the willingness to kind of embrace the change. And for example, one example that I can pull out is the tracking of ethnicities, the willingness to just kind of go in there and consider, we are not all the same. We are not all the same. We consume and interact with coffee differently. So for me, as a passion point, to really just kind of tease out the differences between ethnicity groups who, the Hispanic Americans, which within their culture, really drinking coffee versus other ethnicities that may have not grown up drinking coffee is super interesting and just a reflection of how we need to change and our data needs to reflect how we are evolving.
Now, forgive me, I know that there's been a new version released, but is that in this version, or is that coming at some point, or is this just what you're seeing around? I haven't had a chance to see it yet. I've kind of been very preoccupied sort of organizing some things around here.
There's definitely ethnicity data to be had from the NCDT, and I can't remember off the top of my head if it's in the main publication or within the specialty, but we're definitely being mindful to call out some of the subgroup analysis and the demographic differences.
Someone from the audience has asked, data and storytelling is fascinating. Could you dig deeper into why women with children were more negatively affected by the pandemic? And was this more pronounced by women of color?
Okay, so I'm gonna have to lean outside of the NCDT for that. And I distinctly remember when I was just kind of, doing my secondary research to support, the facts of what I was seeing about women, about the unemployed women being in the data set. And there were so many anthropology research studies that I could basically pull out. And if you just do a quick Google search, you can see that, particularly women of color were more negatively impacted by childcare. And some of the society expectations, the gender roles that women of color kind of grew up with, and it just kind of manifested during the pandemic. So it's definitely there. It certainly isn't the NCDT, and what I saw, it certainly wasn't the lone research study that was able to pull it out, and that's how I came to speak of it in a webinar, was that it's not just me that's noticing it. There are way more research studies out there that actually do show the pandemic impacting women, and especially women of color.
Well, I know you're going to be giving a seminar tomorrow, so I don't want to continue on with too many questions because I'm sure you'll be answering several of them there. But someone wanted to follow up on your sort of comment about ResTech.
Yes.
Is the quality of the ResTech data as good or as close in quality to the data provided by, say, a reputable research company?
There are checks and balances in order for if you are doing the research yourself. There are checks and balances that you can take in order to ensure that you're getting good quality data. I'm also very biased. You can not get any better quality data than going through someone like myself or a research professional, but it's good stuff out there. You're basically going to be using like the latest technology. So it's just a matter of getting a little bit of training and knowing what to look for to ensure that your data set isn't just coming back as bots.
Amazing. Well, Cheryl, thank you so much for being here and for coming all the way over to Portland. I can't wait to see your seminar tomorrow, and I look forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.